We do these things called amoeba through zebra reports, which is the best thing that a natural historian can possibly do for a living, is be asked questions like, how does nature manage moisture? And then look from amoebas through bacteria, fungi, mammals, birds, reptiles, answering that functional question. And we do these deep dive reports. And what comes out from those kinds of, there's yours, how does nature package? What comes out from those are basically it's a catalog, a taxonomy of nature solutions. All of them done with local raw materials, done with chemistries that are life-friendly, and done in a way that fits into an ecosystem. The big question is, how shall we live here? And just like any other organism, it's how are we going to make our artifacts? How are we going to make our tools for living, our homes? How are we going to power ourselves? How are we going to make our stuff? And the first step is, how do you source raw materials? Where does life get raw materials? And believe me, they're not on ships, right? Coming from the developing world. They are right there. They are local, and they're surprising. So for instance, when you think about what a plant uses as its raw material, what is that? What's the raw material that a plant uses to make its wood? Basically, when you hug a tree, you're hugging air. It's carbon dioxide. It's what we breathe out. The plant breathes oxygen out to us, exhales oxygen, but we exhale carbon dioxide. The plant takes it, and that's what it uses to make its wood. Now, there's another thing in the natural world that uses carbon dioxide, and it's all the shells, coral reefs, all the hard cement-like things that are in the ocean. Those are made with carbon dioxide, dissolved carbon dioxide. So when you think about it, we're a species that says that carbon dioxide is a poison right now because we have too much of it. But if we thought like an organism, we'd see it as a raw material. Instead, we're taking it and we're pumping it under the ground. But plants and everything hard in the ocean uses it as a building material. Here's a company called Novomer that is doing what plants do. It's taking CO2, and it's found a way, they found a catalyst by studying plants, and they found a way to take CO2 and turn it into biodegradable plastics. So interesting, it's a small company, but Unilever just invested in it. So imagine Unilever doing its packaging using CO2 to make its packaging. So suddenly Unilever gets a carbon sequestration credit in its packaging. Another source, and you guys are leading the world in this, in sourcing sugarcane, for instance, for biofuels. People are sourcing starches, cornstarch and potato starch for bioplastics. The question is, how are we growing those plants? Because when you think about it, that root up on the right-hand side is a little root tip. And that root tip, to me, is the new oil well. And what I mean by that is that root tip is pulling fertility continually from soil. And if that's where we get our fuels, and if that's where we get our plastics, then we need to find a way to make sure fertility stays in the soil. So it's not a fossil resource. So there's a lot of people working on ecosystem-inspired agriculture. And actually, you know, in this part of the world, what it means is that you look at what would grow naturally in a place. And if you're in the Midwest of the US, your model is the prairie, which retains fertility. How do we make our agriculture more like the prairie? So now, once you get the sourcing, then the question is, how do we make things? And it's one of those questions that we don't ask ourselves. We sort of assume that there's one kind of chemistry, industrial chemistry. And we forget that organisms make things that are really quite amazing. And they make them with a chemistry that's quite different from ours. So we're talking about two recipe books here. We're talking about industrial recipe book, and we're talking about nature's. Now, nature's recipe book makes this caribou's antlers. And those antlers are made in a couple of weeks. They're an incredibly tough ceramic, incredibly tough. And yet, they don't have a kiln. They don't have a fire. They don't have something, you know, our ceramics, we shape a slurry, and then we slide it into an oven. Now there's a ceramic without an oven, so is a coral reef, basically. Now, there's a whole bunch of people in material science who are studying this. They're looking at how to make ceramics. This is the inside of an abalone shell. There are all kinds of people looking at this. It's the twice as tough as our high-tech ceramics. And people are trying to figure out, how do we take literally a glass of water and put the precursors for a ceramic in there, the building blocks of a ceramic, along with a polymer, which is something like a plastic, have those things set up, self-assemble, it's called. This is literally what's happening on the inside of an abalone seashell, and you can see it there at the bottom. That sort of layered structure is a picture of that very, very tough mother of pearl forming. It self-assembles. The polymer self-assembles. The mineral comes out of the seawater and self-assembles, again, without a Bunsen burner, without fire. I mean, the number one largest and most successful energy system on the planet is not our energy grid. It's photosynthesis. 200 billion tons of carbon created every year using the sun's energy. So a leaf takes sunlight, photons, and turns them into fuel. If you haven't done this in a while, do. This is the best way to see nature's energy system. And exciting developments in thin film solar cells. There is a dye-sensitized solar cell. That's the category of solar cells that are inspired by photosynthesis. There's possibility of creating ultra-low-cost solar cells using this technology. Getting energy is one thing, and sipping it is another. Minimizing its use is another. This is a concept car from Daimler Chrysler, Mercedes-Benz, and they studied a little coral reef fish called the boxfish and made it incredibly aerodynamic. It gets about 70 miles per gallon. A kingfisher enters the water like that, it has to look with its eyes at the fish it's going after. So it's designed its beak in a way that creates no pressure wave in the water. If you go to Japan now, you'll be riding a train inspired by this. The bullet train, it was called a bullet train because it used to have a round front, and it would build up a pressure wave, and then when exiting a tunnel, it would create a sonic boom. So the engineer at JR West actually studied the kingfisher, and now the train goes 10% faster on 15% less electricity, and it's quieter.